Omuuonge Uozombuze.
Amaba hoasa.
I now introduce Mr. Alfred Ntonga, who is an experienced leader in the media in Malawi and whose passion for professional journalism has continued to grow and is becoming more evident with each passing day. Mr. Alfred Ntonga has been Deputy Chief Executive Officer for the Nation Publications Limited since January of 2009. This is a newspaper publishing company that started in July of 1993, which is the period that Malawi was transitioning from the 31 years of the one-party dictatorship to multi-party democracy. Between January of 1995 and December of 2012, Mr. Ntonga served as editor-in-chief for the same media company, and he became an editor for the newspaper in September of 1993, becoming one of the initial editors at the company. He has seen the company grow from a bi-weekly newspaper company to a daily newspaper company. As a deputy CEO, he oversees the daily operations of the company. In essence, Mr. Ntonga is one of the fathers and founders of independent journalism in Malawi. He's a graduate of the University of Malawi's Chancellor College, where he studied English and history. He therefore speaks from experience when he discusses the need to maintain journalism standards in all seasons. It doesn't change whether we're in COVID or we don't have a crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome Mr. Alfred Ntonga, who is going to present on maintaining journalism standards in times of crisis. Mr. Ntonga.
Thank you, Teresa, and good morning, everyone. First, an apology. The reception here, I should say the network is not very good, so there might be breaks as I'm talking to you, but I hope everything will go on fine. As Teresa has already said, my name is Alfred Ntonga, and I head the newsroom. Even though I'm Deputy CEO, I'm still the head of the newsroom. And I was asked actually to talk about what we did to survive in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, I mean, we have to survive by being professional, but that's the story that I'm going to share with you. By way of introduction, I must say that the coronavirus pandemic challenge came, I think, when we were grappling with the issue of what to do in the wake of the disruptive effect of social media. You see, it was like social media came in, and we quickly noted that everybody became a journalist, and news was being consumed pretty much in real time, and the speed rendered what we used to thrive on in the past, the scoop, literally superfluous. So we had to really grapple with defining or trying to find our relevance to our audience or our readers. If people could get to know whatever was happening in their country in real time and from any source. And you see, social media again had the power, or I should say, yeah, it had the power of spicing the scoop with pictures, regardless of ethics anyway, because of the power of the smartphone. So people could take pictures, even of bodies of dead people, and paste them there. I mean, in real time, almost as it is happening. So the question was, what else can we be doing? Particularly we people who had our roots, our background in print media, the newspaper. How could we be relevant? So while we were grappling with that, then came coronavirus pandemic. And what did it do? I think the pandemic itself can be described as, again, a game changer. And we felt not only the pandemic, but probably the fear of it, because it made government and other institutions close office, and not only offices, but even schools and borders. The tourism sector virtually collapsed, and so too businesses, particularly in the informal sector, where many Malawians are. And media houses were lucky because this time around we're categorized as providers of essential services. So I think the plans of government were that we're still going to operate. But we were supposed to decongest our offices, restricting entry to our premises, and strictly follow laid down COVID-19 pandemic preventive measures as laid down by government. What that essentially meant was that we're supposed to be wearing masks throughout the day in the office. Time and again, we had to wash hands with soap and use hand sanitizers and practice social distancing, etc. So what happened was that these measures affected our street sales. They also affected corporate subscription and advertising, particularly from the small and medium enterprises. I was just trying to check the figures. I think by the peak in Malawi was somewhere between May and July. Our newspaper sales went down by 40%. And the advertising business went also down by almost 35%. But to us, again, the biggest threat to our business was the lockdown in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and other neighboring countries. It affected the supply chain for raw materials. You see, we depend on newsprint, ink, and plates that are imported from South Africa in order for us to produce the newspaper. And for us to get these raw materials, we have to use road transport via Zimbabwe and Mozambique. So if borders are closed and the supplier is no longer supplying, you can imagine the panic that we went through. So we thought about this as a challenge and then said, what could be the way out? And we realized that probably this is the time now to up the game on publishing e-paper. So during this particular time, we had already started, but I think it was at a small scale. But during this period, we really put much effort in publishing through the e-paper. And I think by August, if I'm not mistaken, the e-paper grew by almost 1,000%. That was the surge in the e-paper. Now, apart from that, we also had to think about social media. Now, social media, when you're talking about social media, it wasn't just a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is also a response to the demographic realities of our time. The population of Malawi is pretty much youthful, and the youth in that category, everybody else up to maybe age 40, thereabout, they make up 70% of our population. Unfortunately, majority of this group, majority in this group does not read the hard copy. Even if you were to give it to them free, they have no time for it. They get their news via Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. So we started that time because we felt that we have to reach to these people. Survival in business meant that these people had to like us, whether by hook or crook, we had to rub them in. And at the same time, we also had to figure out how to monetize this. So the challenge was, how do you monetize social media? How do you bring in the advertiser to give you business? That's the probably our colleagues, I think, in the academia might want to, or if they haven't done this already, might want to look at this information which is, I think, a human right, is entrusted to the private sector. Now, private sector, for it to thrive, first of all, make the money. Now, where you are not making money, what do you do? We face this challenge. So yes, we have to go to social media, yet to be monetized. We are just beginning to discover that certain things are possible. And I would like to believe that sooner or later, I think on this conference, our online editor, Selina Kayinja, will be making a presentation. So probably she'll go deeper into this game, how it is that we are trying to do to monetize our digital platform. But I think for what I wanted to say here, I wanted to say that purely from just technical challenges, we spotted that although social media neutralized, I think, the magic power of the scoop, and the simple story was rendered obsolete, we saw that there were certain challenges that were there. Social media was bringing in the package, maybe news, fake news, outright cook-ups, and comments. They were all mixed together in the story. People would read something and then say, is this true? So we were thinking that probably that question, is this true, would better be answered with our own social media platforms. If we can bring in the element of credibility, accuracy, reliability, so that people would come to our social media platforms and read and believe in what we have written, that is going to bring in more readers or more the big audience, and that probably can also help the interest of monetizing social media. So the end game was still that people had an idea of what was happening in the country, but at the same time, we also had to think about, now, if all this is happening on social media, then what becomes of the hard copy, the newspaper? I thought that was the last part of my presentation, which I wanted to share with you. So we discovered that the old story, or the usual story that we often talk about, an event-based story built on 5 Ws and 1 H, and in an inverted pyramid format or whatever it is, may not really sustain the newspaper going forward. So the challenge that we have to be relevant in the print media is to offer maybe something that is deeper, to really look at important issues and discuss them in a proper context, and probably also bring in deeper analysis that it clearly indicates where the news is going. Now, this is a bigger challenge for us, and I think for many in our small newsrooms across the continent. But although we are way down on the learning curve, we are on it. Much of what we are doing really is through internal training programs, so that the various pockets that are there in the newsroom, people who know this and people who know that, they can make presentations, etc. And then people learn from that and try to put that into practice, and then go through that so that we can learn, we can teach each other and learn from one another. I think that is the greatest challenge. And another challenge that we see probably is to go deeper in doing what somebody has already described as telling truth to power. That is holding the people in public offices to account. And I think the tool for that, the greater tool for that, is investigative journalism. So we are grappling with that. It's an expensive, I should say, damn expensive endeavor. And at the same time, it also requires a lot of skills, and it can take a bit of time for a complete investigative story to appear. But this is what we've been doing all along, and this is what we are doing. We still face challenges, but we are teaching each other. So in summary, this is what I wanted to say, is that we organized ourselves, the newsroom, in a way that we start by saying a journalist must start by giving us, by feeding our digital platforms. So we call it digital first. I only need one solid idea from a reporter, but that solid idea first should yield something for the social media, like Twitter. Maybe if something is happening and there are nice course things that are happening, they can be shared on Twitter. And later on, probably they can change material for Nation Online, or they can change material that can be used for other social media platforms. Of course, that comes along with infographics as well, if they can be obtained. Then this later, the same story has to be now discussed in a deeper context. It has to be analyzed, and we will have to see if it can yield something deeper for the readers tomorrow, through interpretive or analytical journalism. Spicing that, we also are grappling with issues of investigative journalism, because in Malawi, democracy is just beginning to be even more exciting. Issues of accountability for our leaders and issues of accountability even amongst ourselves. These are looming large, and people are beginning to be more and more interested, and we feel this is an area that we have to focus on. So all this implies that we have to multitask. People have to acquire various skills. The old skills of telling a story. The old skills of telling a story for the newspaper have to come along with modern skills of telling the story for various digital platforms. And we believe the way is to help our reporters or our team, including editors, get to know that, because even for digital content, the editing too has to change. It has to fit or to suit the digital platform. So in a nutshell, we have that. But I wanted to say this, that for a long, long time, our story is never or has not been the input of a reporter alone. Normally what happens when we get something exciting, it becomes a collective effort. There are reporters there, there are editors there, and others. We brainstorm together. We keep on adding, or what we call value adding, to the story, until such a time when all of us are happy with the story itself. Of course, not all of us will have the byline. The reporter will get the byline, but behind the reporter, there's just colleagues or peers and editors working together. Now, when COVID-19 pandemic came in and there was need for this decongestion, we editors, some of us, particularly the old ones like myself, had to leave the newsroom. I left the newsroom in April, and up to now, I'm still working from home. Now, most of the reporters too had to leave the newsroom and operate from home. Mostly the people that you find in the newsroom are the editors who are producing the pages. So we are, again, depending on the phone, the smartphone, to link up via Zoom or Google Meet or WhatsApp or whatever, any mode of communication that we can use. We still link up and go on the story that a reporter is chasing, add value to it, and see to it that the shape that the story takes before we publish it reflects what it is that we all were trying to achieve. So in a nutshell, that's the story of Nation Publications Limited, how we managed to survive the COVID without necessarily compromising our professionalism. This is just a summary. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ntonga. Quite elaborate in terms of the challenges that your newspaper, The Nation, faced during COVID. But again, how you got creative in terms of trying to make sure that the sustainability factor is well addressed. A challenge to those in academics: how do we train the journalists to make sure that when they go into the industry, they have the mindset to monetize the news and make sure that that sustainability is guaranteed. And also, how do we train the journalists to be more analytical in their news stories? Because as we heard from Mr. Ntonga, his view is that the traditional 5 Ws and an H, or the event story, may not really be the one that would sell so much to sustain the business of the news. So we need to also get creative in that area. And that's another challenge that those in academics have to address. But more importantly too, training the journalists in investigative journalism. I think we have talked about investigative journalism quite a lot, but investigative journalism that should also be able to sustain the news business is something that we also need to look at. We have a couple of minutes where we can take some questions. There are a number of questions that have been posted in the chat box. And I also communicated that you can also post your questions in the WhatsApp group. I'll take some questions that have come through in the Zoom chat box. One question from Chloe. She says she would love to know more from Mr. Ntonga about their plans around monetizing social media. Mr. Ntonga, if you could touch on that. But I also know Selina Kainja, who is the editor, online editor at Nation, is also around. You could also help out and share your experience in that area. So, Mr. Ntonga, what are the plans around monetizing social media?
As I said earlier on, is an area that we are experimenting, and it's an area that a lot of innovation and creativity is being invested in. So when it comes to such kind of challenges that do not offer precedents that we can learn from, we set up task forces to just come up with brilliant ideas, like you are creating or you're designing an advert, but a brilliant idea brought up together. I mean, people sitting together, banging heads, and come up with ideas that we can try and put into practice. I said earlier on that I really wanted Selina later to be talking about this, because Selina is the one who is actually driving this. Much of it, I think, is at the planning level, but Selina is the champion. So I do not want to preempt that, but maybe if she can come in right now and maybe share some of the ideas that we are using in order to monetize the digital platform. I think that would be lovely. I've seen Selina's already there.
Yeah. Selina, please, if you could come just briefly highlight those plans, please.
Yeah, quickly, some of the plans that we're doing in terms of monetizing the social media platforms. We realized that during the coronavirus, as Mr. Ntonga rightly said, we had a limited number of advertisers physically coming to the office to place adverts. You understand that most of the times our advertisers, they would walk into the office to place their adverts. And because of the coronavirus, social distancing, limitations in terms of movement, they could not come to our offices. So we said we could use social media platforms. We never used to take adverts on Facebook platform, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So we started what we call paid partnerships. So we could get adverts from National Bank and post them on Facebook. And that's why we are making money in terms of also bridging the gap in terms of the adverts that would have gone into the print. The other way that we are doing it is instead of giving free content on social media, because if you write a story, you post it on Facebook, it's basically free. So we said, how can we work around that to make sure that whatever content we are posting, we are getting more engagement, more audience, and then turn that audience into money. So we post links, we post on the website, and then we turn the links into the social media so that when we get the clicks from the website, these are the statistics that we take them to our advertisers to say, if you post, if you place an advert with the Nation Publications Limited, Nation Online, this is the number of people that are going to see your advert. So we have been working the newsroom, sales, marketing, and the business desks to make sure that we develop a business model where we are leveraging whatever platforms that we have at the moment to make sure that we're making money and being self-sustaining until such a point where we feel, I think we are comfortable. I'm not sure whether COVID is going away 2021, but those are the plans that we are doing. We are also doing the boosting, where when we send a story, for instance, investigative pieces, we just do the teasers and then we boost the story. The boosting is just basically to get more audience. And we believe by doing so, because I think Mr. Ntonga area said that you would find loyal customers, readers who would not miss a copy, a hard copy. So if they know what is trending, that has also led to people to go on the street to buy the print copy. So cross-marketing of print and online content has been one of our major goals in terms of monetizing our content. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Selena. This is what we want in terms of the conference, sharing ideas, because some of the challenges that we're facing really are not unique to Malawi. There could be some newspaper facing the same challenge in Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia, or wherever. And therefore, when you hear such creative ideas on how they have managed to survive monetizing something that really they did not monetize before, it kind of gives you encouragement that you can also try to do the same. So this is the entire essence of this training. There's another question from Opoyemi. My question is, what are the dangers of incorporating conspiracy theories into the daily newsroom? I think many news consumers tend to believe such theories, and this goes beyond the 5 Ws and an H news stories. Mr. Ntonga, if you could also take that one, the dangers of incorporating conspiracy theories in the newsroom.
Yeah, I think that is not exactly the attribute of the newsroom. Maybe we'll be learning from Mr. Trump, conspiracy theories. But maybe let's say they're likely maybe to surface when people begin to speculate a lot in the spirit or in the name of news analysis. When you go to some experts, etc., they'll go beyond maybe what the facts can support, and then say this and that, and probably harness it to some theory which probably is far-fetched. Those are likely to be there, but I think one way of doing it is to also ensure that the analysis doesn't just reflect the views of one person, because this is not science like a 1 and 1 equals 2, and then everybody believes it that way. People look at the same issue and they can interpret that differently. So when one side goes this way, I think it's also our duty to show maybe the other side. There is just balancing the people who are commenting on it without necessarily gagging. Maybe they can be, well, everything else has to operate within the parameters of what is acceptable ethically, and that is not conjecture, but things are really tied together to the issues in question, issues that are being discussed. It requires really maturity, but sometimes it also requires keen interest, particularly of editors, to salvage such kind of stories. So in a nutshell, maybe it's inevitable because people have to speak, and people also can think and theorize, etc. But at the same time, we can manage that by balancing it up. If you see one side reflecting this, then probably there are 2 sides to a coin. Look for the other side. in a nutshell, this is what I would say. But more, I think more to the point is that we should be able to detect conjecture, and where things are just far-fetched and without tying it to the facts, probably we can control that. That's what I can also say. Thank you.
And I know that we're running out of time, but since we already have these questions up there, there was one question from Edward Kuasha, and the question was going to Professor Wasserman. I don't know if our keynote speaker is still around, but I think the issue has also been quite addressed by Mr. Ntonga. He was asking about how to improve the sustainability challenge that most media houses in Africa are facing. I think Mr. Ntonga touched on that. But if our keynote speaker would just want to add on something, he's welcome to come in. But again, to Mr. Ntonga, another question from Chloe, could Mr. Ntonga speak to how the digital-first approach, one big idea, has affected their analytical or long-form pieces? Are they writing less or these pieces as a result? Professor Wasserman first, and then I'll move on to Mr. Ntonga before we break.
Yes, I think that's an interesting and of course an important question. I don't know if I really have clear-cut answers to it, but I think we have to understand that journalists work increasingly in what is referred to sometimes as a gig economy. I mean, there's the idea that we are necessarily going to educate journalists to go and work for big platforms, big organizations. I think those days are over. Of course, hopefully, those big platforms will still be employing new journalists and still be investing in journalism. Of course, there are often junior journalists do get positions at these big organizations, but when it comes to investigative journalism and so on, that those budgets are being cut. But I think in terms of how do we educate and how do we respond to that challenge in education is also to think about maybe training journalists in things like entrepreneurial journalism and how to build your own brand. I mean, it's sometimes those sort of terms are a bit bristling and jarring for journalists to think of themselves as a brand or some sort of product. I mean, that's not the implication, but the idea that often you have to make sure that you as a personal your personal brand, your personal integrity is such that you can also work under these precarious conditions. But I think it's also a challenge for media research, for instance, at university level, to research new business models for journalism, to think about these new developments around, for instance, donor-funded or subscription and philanthropy. I mean, there's a lot of different models out there at the moment. So I think those ideas, those discussions should be integrated into journalism education, and young journalists that are being prepared to go into this new context, I think we should try and train them to be resilient and to be adaptable to this context, which is often very precarious and uncertain.
Thanks so much, Professor. Mr. Ntonga, how the digital-first approach has affected your analytical long-form pieces?
Yeah, I would say this, that I think this is just a way of mitigating the challenge of having the digital platform grow independently, like having its own team of reporters, and then the print having its own team of reporters in the work of, I think, constrained budgets that we face in our small newsrooms. Now, the digital first only helps ensure that the back of our reporters in the newsroom, they start by feeding the digital platforms. And I think Selina then will just maybe look few people from outside the newsroom to spice that in terms of numbers. What it has done is that we do not begin to work on this important story immediately So we have our what we call synopsis, and a news idea will yield a synopsis. We'll discuss that and then see what opportunities there. So like for digital first, we'll think about should she or he file for Twitter? What else? Maybe online. What else? I think that they're going to plan with Selena. So that reporter will know what is required of them for the digital platform. Then the same issue will go now to the hard copy, which is phase 2. And then they'll plan with the section head responsible for that section, how to handle this. And you discover that sometimes it can be a layered story, sometimes not, but it may require some kind of infographics or pictures and things of that nature. So they also know what is required there. I stopped asking for 2 stories from a reporter. I ask for only one good idea, but some prolific ones will come up with 2, but often 1 is enough and their head will be reeling by the end of the day. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that response and all the questions that came through.
Omuuonge Uozombuze.
Amaba hoasa.